The thunderous crack of a pistol firing into the air shattered the early morning quiet of Riverton, Wyoming, in the spring of 1876. As Clara Nichols stood trembling on the rickety porch of her father's general store, watching helplessly as the last link to her mother disappeared into the saddlebag of a fleeing thief. "Stop him!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with desperation. "He stole my mother's ring." The townsfolk who had gathered at the commotion stared after the dust cloud that marked the thief's hasty departure, but none made a move to pursue him. Clara's shoulders slumped in defeat, tears welling in her eyes as she clutched the empty jewelry box to her chest. At 22, Clara had already weathered more than her fair share of hardship. Her mother had passed 3 years prior from consumption, leaving behind only a simple gold band with a small emerald stone that matched Clara's eyes. It was her most precious possession, and now it was gone. "Ain't nobody going to catch Ryder Jenkins now," muttered old Mr. Peterson from behind his bushy white mustache. "That man rides like the devil himself is on his tail." Clara bit her lip to keep from crying. The ring had been the last thing she had to remember her mother by, and tomorrow would mark the anniversary of her passing. She had taken it out that morning just to hold it, to feel closer to the woman who had taught her everything about kindness and perseverance. "Someone has to try," she insisted, gathering her skirts and preparing to march down the steps herself when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her pause. A tall stranger atop a magnificent chestnut stallion came riding down Riverton's dusty Main Street. His broad-brimmed hat shielded his face from view, but there was no mistaking the confident set of his shoulders or the expert way he handled his mount. The stranger reined in his horse before the gathering, his piercing blue eyes taking in the scene with a quick, assessing glance. "What's happened here?" His voice was deep and clear, carrying easily to where Clara stood. "Thief," someone in the crowd offered. "Stole the Nichols girl's ring and rode south." Without hesitation, the stranger touched the brim of his hat in Clara's direction. "How long ago?" "Not 5 minutes," she replied, hope flickering to life within her. "Please, it's all I have left of my mother." The man nodded once decisively. "I'll bring it back to you, Miss Nichols." With that simple promise, he spurred his horse into motion, the powerful animal leaping forward with such speed that Clara had to shield her eyes from the cloud of dust left in their wake. "That's Owen Callahan," Mr. Peterson informed her, sounding impressed. "Finest tracker this side of the Rockies. If anyone can catch Jenkins, it's him." Clara watched the rider disappear from view, her heart pounding with a strange mixture of despair and hope. "Godspeed, Mr. Callahan," she whispered. The next few hours passed with excruciating slowness. Clara tried to focus on her duties at the store, but her gaze kept drifting to the window, searching the horizon for any sign of return. Her father, Henry Nichols, tried his best to comfort her, but the loss weighed heavy on both their hearts. The ring had been a symbol of their shared love for the woman who had been the center of their small family. It was nearing dusk when Clara, sitting on the porch steps with her chin in her hands, spotted a lone rider approaching from the south. She stood quickly, shielding her eyes against the setting sun. The silhouette was unmistakable, the same broad shoulders, the same proud posture, but was he alone? Had he failed? As Owen Callahan drew closer, Clara's heart sank. There was no sign of the thief, and the grim set of the tracker's mouth told her all she needed to know before he even dismounted. "Miss Nichols," he said, removing his hat respectfully. Up close, she could see that his face was sun-weathered but handsome, with those striking blue eyes framed by dark lashes. A thin scar ran along his jawline, speaking of adventures she could only imagine. "I'm sorry to report that I caught up with Jenkins at the trading post in Sweetwater." "And my ring?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Owen's expression darkened. "He sold it, to a merchant heading east on the morning stage." The words struck her like physical blows. "Sold it," Clara repeated, her voice barely audible. "He sold my ring." She sank back down onto the porch steps, the reality washing over her. The ring was gone, truly gone, making its way east with some stranger who had no idea of its significance. The tears she had been holding back all day finally spilled over, tracking down her cheeks in silent streams. Owen Callahan stood awkwardly before her, his hat still clutched in his hands. Then, to her surprise, he knelt down so they were at eye level, his expression softening. "Miss Nichols," he said quietly, "I may not be able to return your mother's ring, but I promise you this isn't the end." Clara wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "What do you mean?" Owen reached into his vest pocket and pulled out something that glinted gold in the fading light. "The thief managed to get away, but not before I convinced him to part with the money he got for your ring. It's not the same, I know, but it's something." He pressed the coins into her palm, more than the ring was likely worth, Clara realized with surprise. She looked up at him, confused. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." A small smile touched his lips. "Because no one should lose something so precious twice." Clara studied him for a long moment, taking in his earnest expression. There was something about Owen Callahan that made her want to trust him, despite having just met. Perhaps it was the quiet strength he exuded, or the kindness in his eyes that contrasted with his rugged exterior. "Thank you," she said finally, closing her fingers around the coins. "But I don't want the money. I wanted the ring because it was my mother's, because she wore it every day of her married life. It can't be replaced." Owen nodded in understanding, then appeared to consider something. To Clara's astonishment, he reached for his own hand and removed a simple silver band from his little finger. "Then I'll give you mine and never let go," he said, holding out the ring to her. "It was my father's. He gave it to me before he died, told me to keep it until I found something worth holding on to forever." Clara stared at the offering, speechless. "Mr. Callahan, I couldn't possibly—" "You can," he insisted gently. "Consider it a placeholder. I'll find your mother's ring, Miss Nichols. I swear it on my honor. But until then, perhaps knowing someone else understands what it means to cherish a memory might bring you some comfort." She hesitated, then slowly extended her hand. Owen placed the silver band in her palm, his calloused fingers brushing against her skin with surprising gentleness. The ring was still warm from his hand. "I'll find a way to repay your kindness," she promised. Owen replaced his hat and stood. "No need. But if you'd permit me to call on you tomorrow, perhaps you could tell me more about the ring. The more I know, the better chance I have of tracking it down." Clara nodded, a small spark of hope igniting in her chest. "I'd like that, Mr. Callahan." "Owen," he corrected with a smile that transformed his serious face. "My friends call me Owen." As promised, Owen appeared at the general store the following morning. Clara had just finished arranging a display of canned goods when the bell above the door jangled, announcing his arrival. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, hat in hand, looking somewhat out of place among the shelves of domestic items. "Good morning, Miss Nichols," he greeted her, stepping inside. Today he wore a clean blue shirt that made his eyes appear even more striking. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." Clara shook her head, suddenly aware of her simple brown dress and the loose tendrils of hair that had escaped her bun. "Not at all. Father is handling the inventory in the back, so I can spare a few minutes." She led him to the small sitting area in the corner of the store where customers occasionally rested while their orders were filled. They sat across from each other, an awkward silence falling between them until Owen cleared his throat. "I've been asking around town about your mother's ring," he said. The stagecoach that merchant took was headed for Cheyenne. From there, he planned to take the train to Chicago. Clara's heart sank. Chicago, that's so far. Owen nodded. It is. But I've sent telegrams to contacts along the route. If the ring surfaces in any pawn shops or jewelry stores, we'll hear of it. We, Clara repeated, raising an eyebrow. A faint flush colored Owen's tanned cheeks. I meant to say I'll hear of it, and inform you immediately, of course. Clara found herself smiling at his discomfort. There was something endearing about this man who projected such confidence on horseback, but seemed almost shy in her presence. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Callahan Owen," she said, changing the subject. "What brings a tracker like you to Riverton?" Owen relaxed slightly, settling back in his chair. "I was actually on my way to Montana Territory. There's work for men with my skills up north." "And what skills are those exactly?" Clara asked, genuinely curious. "Tracking, mostly. I spent some years as a scout for the cavalry, then worked as a Pinkerton for a spell." He shrugged modestly. "I've got a knack for finding people who don't want to be found." Clara toyed with the silver ring she now wore on a chain around her neck, having refused to place it on her finger. It seemed too intimate a gesture for a man she barely knew. "And what about family? Do you have anyone waiting for you in Montana?" A shadow passed over Owen's face. "No, no family to speak of anymore. My mother passed when I was a boy, and my father followed about 5 years ago. I've been on my own since then." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly, recognizing the familiar pain of loss in his eyes. "It's not easy, is it, being the one left behind?" Owen met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "No, it's not, but it teaches you to value what matters. Which is why I understand how important your mother's ring is to you." Before Clara could respond, the bell above the door jangled again as a customer entered. She reluctantly stood, duty calling. "I should get back to work," she said. Owen rose as well, reaching for his hat. "Of course. I didn't mean to take up so much of your time." "You didn't," Clara assured him quickly. "In fact, I'd be pleased if you joined my father and me for dinner tonight. It's the least I can do to thank you for your efforts." The invitation seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. Clara wasn't in the habit of inviting strange men to dinner, but there was something about Owen Callahan that made her want to know more. "I'd be honored," he replied with a genuine smile that reached all the way to his eyes. That evening, Clara found herself taking extra care with her appearance, selecting her best blue dress and pinning her hair in a more flattering style than her usual practical bun. Her father noticed her efforts with raised eyebrows, but made no comment as they prepared the modest meal together. Owen arrived precisely at the agreed time, bearing a small bouquet of wildflowers that made Clara blush with pleasure. Dinner conversation flowed more easily than she had expected. Her father, initially reserved, warmed to Owen as the tracker shared tales of his travels across the Western Territories. Clara found herself captivated by his stories, not just the adventures themselves, but the way he told them, with humility and thoughtfulness that suggested depth beyond the typical drifter. As the evening drew to a close, Owen helped Clara clear the dishes while her father excused himself to his pipe on the porch. "That was the best meal I've had in months," Owen told her as she handed him a plate to dry. "Thank you for inviting me." Clara smiled, enjoying the domestic scene they made together in the small kitchen. "It was simple fare, but I'm glad you enjoyed it." "It wasn't just the food," Owen admitted, his voice lowering slightly. "It's been a long while since I sat at a family table." The vulnerability in his admission touched Clara deeply. She paused in her washing, turning to face him fully. "How long will you stay in Riverton?" she asked, surprised by how much she cared about the answer. Owen carefully set down the dried plate. I'd planned to leave for Montana tomorrow." "Oh," Clara couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. "But plans can change," he added quickly. "There's work to be had here too, I imagine, and I did make you a promise about that ring." Hope fluttered in Clara's chest. "So you'll stay, at least for a little while?" Owen's gaze held her steadily. "If I had a reason to." The implication hung in the air between them, both thrilling and frightening in its possibilities. Clara was saved from having to respond by her father's return. But as Owen bid them good night at the door, his lingering look told her that their conversation wasn't over, it was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, Owen became a regular fixture in Riverton. He took odd jobs around town helping the blacksmith, joining posses organized by the sheriff, and even assisting Clara's father with some of the heavier work at the store. Each evening, without fail, he would stop by to report any news about Clara's ring, though so far his telegrams had yielded no results. More importantly to Clara, he made time to see her. They began taking walks after the store closed, sometimes strolling through town, other times venturing to the river for which Riverton was named. During these quiet moments together, they shared stories of their pasts, dreams for their futures, and gradually, the tentative beginnings of deeper feelings. "My mother would have liked you," Clara told him one evening as they sat on the riverbank, watching the sunset paint the water with gold. "She always said a person's true character shows in how they treat others when there's nothing to gain." Owen smiled at that, skipping a stone across the water's surface. "And what do you think she'd make of my character, Miss Nichols?" Clara pretended to consider, though she already knew the answer. "I think she'd approve. You've gone to great lengths to help a stranger with no expectation of reward." "Not entirely without expectation," Owen admitted quietly, his eyes finding hers. "I've gained something far more valuable than I anticipated when I rode into Riverton." Clara felt her cheeks warm, and not from the setting sun. "And what might that be, Mr. Callahan?" Instead of answering, Owen reached over and gently took her hand in his. The simple contact sent a thrill through Clara that both frightened and exhilarated her. They sat in silence as the sun disappeared behind the distant mountains, neither willing to break the spell of the moment. It was on the walk back to town that Owen finally broached the subject that had been on both their minds. "Clara," he said, her first name still new on his lips, "I know it's been only a short time, but I find myself thinking of you constantly. When I'm not with you, I'm counting the hours until I can see you again." Clara's heart raced at his words. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. Owen stopped walking, turning to face her in the gathering twilight. "I meant what I said when I gave you my father's ring. It was meant for something worth holding on to forever. I'm beginning to think that might be you." Before Clara could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. A rider was approaching at speed, kicking up dust along the road. As he drew closer, Clara recognized the familiar face of young Billy Warren, son of the telegraph operator. "Mr. Callahan," the boy called out, reining in his horse. "Pa sent me to find you. Said it's urgent, a telegram came in about Miss Nichols' ring." Owen and Clara exchanged a quick, hopeful glance before hurrying after Billy toward the telegraph office. Mr. Warren was waiting for them, a yellow slip of paper in his hand. "Got a response from your contact in Cheyenne," he told Owen, handing over the telegram. "Thought you'd want to see it straight away." Owen read the message quickly, his expression changing from anticipation to seriousness. "The merchant sold the ring to a jewelry dealer named Hoffman, who's taken it to Denver." Clara's spirits, which had soared at the news, now faltered. "Denver? That's even further than Cheyenne." Owen folded the telegram and tucked it into his pocket. "But it's a solid lead, Clara, the first real one we've had." He turned to her, determination etched in every line of his face. "I need to go to Denver." The words hung in the air between them, their earlier conversation about feelings suddenly overshadowed by this new development. Clara felt torn between hope for recovering her mother's ring and fear of losing the man who had come to mean so much to her. "How long would you be gone?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "A week, maybe 2, Owen replied. "The journey itself takes several days each way," Clara nodded, wrestling with her conflicting emotions. "Then you should go, if there's a chance to recover my mother's ring." Owen stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Come with me," Clara blinked in surprise. "To Denver? But I can't just leave the store, my father. Your father can manage the store for a fortnight," Owen insisted. "Clara, I don't want to leave you behind, not when we've only just found each other. And this is your ring we're seeking. You should be there when we recover it." The idea was scandalous, an unmarried woman traveling alone with a man across territorial lines. Yet the prospect of adventure, of seeing more of the world beyond Riverton, and most importantly, of staying by Owen's side, was undeniably tempting. "I'll need to speak with my father," she said finally. Owen's face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Of course. We can go to him together, first thing in the morning." Clara expected her father to refuse outright. Henry Nichols was a traditional man with strong opinions about propriety. To her astonishment, after listening to their proposal, he simply sighed and fixed Owen with a penetrating stare. "You'll protect her with your life?" he demanded. "Yes, sir," Owen answered without hesitation. "With my life." Henry turned to his daughter. "And this is truly what you want, Clara, to go chasing after a ring that might already be lost for good?" Clara met her father's gaze steadily. "It's not just about the ring anymore, father. It's about seeing more of the world, about making my own choices. And yes, it's about Owen too." Her father's expression softened at her honesty. "You're so like your mother," he said with a sad smile. "She always had an adventurous spirit too." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded once. "You have my blessing, but on one condition." "Anything," Clara promised. "Take Mrs. Holloway as a chaperone." Clara's eyes widened. Edith Holloway was their elderly neighbor, a widow with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes. The idea of traveling with her, watching their every move, was less than appealing. "Father," she began to protest. "It's the only way I'll agree," Henry said firmly. "You'll need a female companion for propriety's sake, and Edith has been complaining about wanting to visit her sister in Colorado anyway. This is my compromise, Clara. Take it or stay in Riverton." Clara glanced at Owen, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Very well," she conceded. "If Mrs. Holloway is willing to accompany us, I accept your condition." To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Holloway was delighted by the invitation. "Lord knows I've been trying to get to Lucille's for years," she declared when Clara extended the invitation. "My bones might creak, but I can still sit a stagecoach as well as anyone half my age." And so, 3 days later, Clara found herself boarding the eastbound stagecoach alongside Owen and Mrs. Holloway, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had never traveled farther than the neighboring town of Lander, and now she was embarking on a journey to Denver with a man she had known for less than a month. By all conventional standards, she was behaving recklessly, yet she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The stage was cramped with 6 passengers, but Clara hardly noticed the discomfort. Each mile that passed took her further from the familiar confines of Riverton and deeper into unknown territory. Owen sat across from her, their knees occasionally brushing in the confined space, sending sparks of awareness through her despite Mrs. Holloway's vigilant presence beside her. The journey proved more arduous than Clara had anticipated. The roads were rough, the accommodations at way stations basic at best, and the hours of travel seemingly endless. Yet she found herself reveling in every new experience, the vast landscapes that changed from forests to plains, the colorful characters they encountered at each stop, and most of all, the freedom that came with leaving home behind. Mrs. Holloway, despite her age, proved to be a surprisingly resilient traveler with an unexpected streak of mischief. On their third night, when they stopped at a small settlement with a single boarding house, she announced loudly that she required a room to herself due to her nocturnal disturbances. "My snoring would keep the dead awake," she told the bemused proprietor, ignoring Clara's mortified expression. "Better give the young couple their own room. I wouldn't want to disturb their rest." Despite Clara's protests that she and Owen weren't a couple, the arrangement stood. That evening, after a simple supper, Clara found herself alone with Owen in the boarding house's small parlor, while Mrs. Holloway allegedly retired early. "I suspect your chaperone is less concerned with propriety than your father believed," Owen observed with amusement as they sat before the crackling fire. Clara couldn't help but laugh. "I'm beginning to think she agreed to come along purely for the entertainment value." Owen's expression grew more serious as he studied her face in the firelight. "Do you regret coming, Clara? It's been a difficult journey." "Not for a moment," she answered truthfully. "I've seen more in these past days than in all my previous years combined. How could I regret that?" Owen reached for her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "There's so much more I want to show you, places I've been, things I've seen. The world is vast, Clara, and full of wonders." The intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Are you proposing to be my guide, Mr. Callahan?" "I'm proposing to be whatever you'll allow me to be," he replied softly. Clara was acutely aware of how alone they were, of the warmth of his hand holding hers, of the way the firelight cast shadows across his handsome face. She leaned forward slightly, her heart racing. "And if I allowed you to kiss me," she whispered, scarcely believing her own boldness. Owen's gaze dropped to her lips. "Then I would consider myself the luckiest man in all the territories." He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw. But Clara held her ground, her eyes fluttering closed as his lips finally met hers in a gentle kiss that nonetheless sent lightning coursing through her veins. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, and she leaned into the touch, savoring the tenderness of the moment. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Clara felt as though something fundamental had shifted between them. What had begun as a shared quest for her mother's ring had transformed into something far more significant, a journey that was changing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "I should bid you good night," Owen said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her hand. Clara nodded, equally unwilling to end their time together but conscious of maintaining some semblance of propriety. "Tomorrow we'll reach Denver." "Tomorrow," Owen agreed, finally standing. "And we'll find your ring, Clara, I promise you that." She believed him. Somehow, in the short time she had known Owen Callahan, her trust in him had grown absolute. Whether that faith was wise remained to be seen, but as she watched him walk away, Clara knew that whatever happened in Denver, she would never regret following her heart on this adventure. Denver proved to be a shock to Clara's senses after the relative quiet of Riverton. The streets teemed with activity, horse-drawn carriages and wagons navigating between pedestrians, storefronts displaying goods she had only read about in catalogs, and buildings that rose higher than any she had seen before. The city hummed with an energy that both exhilarated and overwhelmed her. They took rooms at a respectable hotel near the city center, Mrs. Holloway insisting on maintaining appearances despite her increasingly transparent attempts to give Owen and Clara time alone together. After settling in, Owen wasted no time in pursuing their objective. Hoffman's jewelry shop is on Larimer Street, he informed them after consulting his telegram. I suggest we head there directly. The jewelry shop was an elegant establishment with large glass windows displaying trays of glittering gems and precious metals. Clara felt a flutter of hope as they entered, the soft chime of a bell announcing their arrival. A well-dressed man with spectacles and a meticulously groomed beard approached them. "Welcome to Hoffman's fine jewelry. How may I assist you today?" Owen stepped forward. "We're looking for a specific piece, a gold band with an emerald stone. I believe you purchased it recently from a merchant traveling from Wyoming." Mr. Hoffman's expression shifted subtly, becoming more guarded. "I acquire many pieces in the course of business, sir." "May I ask why you're inquiring about this particular item?" Clara moved to Owen's side. "The ring was stolen from me," she explained. "It belonged to my mother and it's of great sentimental value. We've traced it here to Denver to your shop." The jeweler studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "I do recall the piece you're describing. A simple design but fine craftsmanship with an emerald of unusual clarity." Clara's heart leaped. "Yes, that's it. Do you still have it?" Mr. Hoffman's expression turned apologetic. "I'm afraid not, miss. I sold it just yesterday to a gentleman who was seeking a gift for his fiancée." The hope that had been building in Clara's chest collapsed. "Sold," she echoed faintly, unconsciously echoing her words from that day on the porch in Riverton. "He sold my ring." Owen placed a supportive hand at the small of her back. "Who purchased it, Mr. Hoffman? Can you provide us with a name?" The jeweler hesitated. "I'm not in the habit of disclosing my customers' information, Mr. Callahan," Owen supplied. "Owen Callahan. And I understand your position, but this is a matter of great importance. The ring was stolen property, albeit purchased by you in good faith." Mr. Hoffman frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The gentleman was a Mr. Theodore Hammond, a businessman from San Francisco who was passing through Denver on his way west. "San Francisco," Clara whispered, dismay washing over her. It might as well have been the moon for how distant and unreachable it seemed. Owen's expression remained determined. "When did he leave Denver? Do you know which route he's taking?" "He mentioned boarding the westbound train this afternoon," Mr. Hoffman replied, "but that's all I know." Owen checked his pocket watch. "What time is the train scheduled to depart?" 4 o'clock, I believe." Owen exchanged a quick glance with Clara. It was already past 3. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Hoffman. We appreciate your candor." As they hurried from the shop, Mrs. Holloway struggling to keep pace with their urgent strides, Owen outlined a hasty plan. "We can make it to the station if we take a carriage. There's still a chance to intercept Hammond before the train departs." Clara nodded, allowing herself to be guided into the first available carriage. As they rattled through the streets of Denver toward the train station, she tried to temper her renewed hope with realism. Even if they reached the station in time, what then? How could they convince a complete stranger to part with his purchase? The station was crowded with travelers when they arrived, the westbound train already steaming on the tracks as passengers boarded. Owen helped the ladies down from the carriage, then turned to Mrs. Holloway. "Would you be willing to wait here while we search for Mr. Hammond?" he asked. The elderly woman waved them off. "Go, go. I'll be perfectly fine on this bench with my novel. Young love waits for no one, least of all an old woman with aching feet." Despite the urgency of their mission, Clara couldn't help but smile at Mrs. Holloway's characterization of their relationship. She and Owen hurried toward the train, scanning the faces of the boarding passengers. There, Owen said suddenly, nodding toward a well-dressed man helping a lady in an elegant traveling suit onto the train. The description matches tall, fair-haired, expensive attire. They approached the couple, Owen taking the lead. "Mr. Hammond, Theodore Hammond," the man turned, surprise evident on his handsome face. "Yes. Do I know you, sir?" "No, sir, you don't. My name is Owen Callahan, and this is Miss Clara Nichols. We need to speak with you regarding a ring you purchased yesterday from Hoffman's Jewelry." Understanding dawned in Hammond's eyes. "Ah, I see." He glanced at his female companion. "Darling, would you mind finding our compartment? I'll join you momentarily." Once the lady had boarded the train, Hammond turned back to them with a sympathetic expression. "Mr. Hoffman sent word that someone might approach me about the ring. He explained the situation after I had already left his establishment." Clara stepped forward, hope rising within her. "Then you understand why we're here. The ring belonged to my mother. It was stolen from me, and I've traveled all the way from Wyoming to recover it." Hammond reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I believe this is the piece in question." He opened the box to reveal the familiar gold band with its emerald stone. Clara gasped softly, tears springing to her eyes at the sight of her mother's ring, so close yet still beyond her reach. "Yes," she whispered. "That's it." Hammond studied her face for a long moment, then closed the box with a decisive snap. "I paid a considerable sum for this ring, Miss Nichols." "I understand, Mr. Hammond," Owen interjected. "We're prepared to reimburse you the full amount plus additional compensation for the inconvenience." A whistle blew, signaling the train's imminent departure. Hammond glanced toward the conductor, who was beginning to close the passenger doors, then back at the couple before him. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Callahan," he said finally. "I can see this ring means a great deal to Miss Nichols. Far more than it could ever mean to my fiancé, who has no shortage of jewelry." He held out the velvet box to Clara, who accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she breathed, unable to believe their luck. "I don't know how to express my gratitude." Hammond smiled. "Your expression is thanks enough, Miss Nichols. Besides, I find I rather enjoy the role of Good Samaritan." He tipped his hat to them both. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I must board before I'm left behind." As the train pulled away from the station, Clara stood clutching the velvet box to her chest, tears of joy streaming down her face. Owen wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "You did it," she said, looking up at him with shining eyes. "You kept your promise." Owen shook his head. "We did it, Clara, together." She opened the box again, gazing down at her mother's ring. After all the miles traveled, all the obstacles overcome, it was finally back where it belonged. She carefully removed the ring and slipped it onto her finger, where it fit as perfectly as it always had. "I can hardly believe it's over," she murmured. "That we succeeded." Owen's expression grew suddenly serious. "Not everything is over, Clara." She looked up at him questioningly, and to her astonishment, Owen took both her hands in his. "Clara Nichols, when I rode into Riverton that day, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. I was a drifter, a man with no roots and no reason to plant any. But then I met you, a woman with more courage and heart than anyone I've ever known, and everything changed." Clara's heart began to race as Owen continued. "These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Traveling together, facing challenges side by side, I've come to realize what I want most in this world isn't waiting for me in Montana or anywhere else. It's right here in front of me." He reached up to touch the silver band that still hung around Clara's neck. "I gave you this ring as a placeholder, a promise to find what was lost. Now that promise is fulfilled, but I find myself wanting to make another. Clara's breath caught as Owen slowly knelt before her, right there on the train platform, oblivious to the curious stares of passers-by. "Clara, I know it's sudden. I know by all conventional wisdom we've known each other too brief a time for what I'm about to ask, but my heart is certain, and I hope yours is too." He took a deep breath. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Time seemed to stand still as Clara gazed down at the man before her, this strong, kind, honorable man who had ridden into her life like a hero from a dime novel, but had proved himself to be so much more. In the space of a heartbeat, she saw not just the adventure they had shared, but the lifetime of adventures that could lie ahead. "Yes," she answered, her voice clear and certain despite the tears in her eyes. "Yes, Owen Callahan, I will marry you." Joy blazed across Owen's face as he rose to his feet, lifting Clara off hers in an exuberant embrace that drew applause from onlookers. When he set her down, his blue eyes were alight with happiness. "I don't have a proper engagement ring to give you," he admitted. "But perhaps, until I can provide one, you might wear my father's ring not just as a placeholder, but as a symbol of our promise to each other." Clara removed the silver band from its chain and held it out to Owen. "Would you put it on for me? Not as a placeholder anymore, but as a beginning." Owen took the ring and slipped it onto her finger alongside her mother's band. The two rings, one silver, one gold, complemented each other perfectly, old memories and new promises bound together. "Mrs. Holloway will be beside herself," Clara laughed, suddenly remembering their chaperone. Owen grinned. "Something tells me she's been expecting this outcome all along." Sure enough, when they returned to the bench where they had left her, Mrs. Holloway took one look at their glowing faces and the rings on Clara's finger and let out a satisfied harumph. "Well, it's about time," she declared. "Now, when's the wedding? My old bones can't manage too many more long journeys, so I hope you're planning something soon." Clara and Owen exchanged amused glances. "We haven't discussed the details yet," Clara admitted. "Well, discuss them on the way back to the hotel," Mrs. Holloway instructed, rising from the bench with surprising agility. "A proper engagement requires proper celebration, and I believe a fine dinner is in order tonight." As they made their way back to the carriage, Owen kept Clara's hand firmly in his, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. The silver and gold bands caught the late afternoon sunlight, winking with promise. "What happens now?" Clara asked softly. "Do we return to Riverton?" Owen nodded. "First, to share our news with your father and get his blessing. After that." He paused, considering. "What would you think about Montana? I still have that job waiting if I want it. We could start fresh there, build a home together." The idea was both exciting and intimidating. "I've never lived anywhere but Riverton," Clara mused, "but after this adventure, I find I'm rather fond of new experiences." She squeezed his hand. "Wherever you go, I go. That's all that matters to me." Owen's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then Montana it is for a while at least, and after that, who knows? The world is wide, Clara Callahan, and we have all the time in the world to explore it together." Clara laughed at the sound of her future name. "Clara Callahan," she repeated, testing it on her tongue. "I like the sound of that." The return journey to Riverton seemed to pass in half the time of their outward trip, fueled by their excitement and plans for the future. Even the discomforts of the stagecoach couldn't dampen their spirits as they discussed their wedding, their dreams for a home, and the adventures that lay ahead. Mrs. Holloway, for her part, seemed content to observe their happiness, occasionally offering practical advice or gently reminding them of proprieties that, in their enthusiasm, they sometimes forgot. When they finally arrived back in Riverton, Henry Nichols was waiting at the stage stop, his worried expression giving way to relief at the sight of his daughter. Clara flew into his arms, then stepped back to display both rings on her finger. "We found it, Father, and—" She glanced at Owen, who stepped forward to stand beside her. "We have more news." Henry looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I suspected as much when you left," he said with a wry smile, "though I admit I thought it might take longer than a fortnight." Owen extended his hand to the older man. "Mr. Nichols, I'd like to formally ask for your blessing to marry your daughter. I promise to cherish and protect her all the days of my life." Henry clasped Owen's hand firmly. "You've already proven your commitment by bringing her safely home with both her mother's ring and her heart intact. You have my blessing, son." The wedding took place just 3 weeks later in Riverton's small church, decorated with wildflowers gathered from the surrounding countryside. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Holloway and the ladies of the sewing circle, with both rings silver and gold shining on her finger. Owen, standing at the altar in a new suit purchased for the occasion, thought he had never seen anything as beautiful as Clara walking toward him on her father's arm, her face radiant with happiness. "You are the greatest treasure I've ever found," he whispered as she joined him before the minister. Clara's smile was like sunrise. "And you, Owen Callahan, are the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was making." Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to cherish and support each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed his bride with a tenderness that made the assembled townspeople sigh with approval. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing in the town square. As twilight fell, Owen led Clara away from the festivities to a quiet spot by the river where they had spent so many evenings getting to know each other. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, still marveling at the sound of it. "Are you happy?" Clara leaned against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." Owen's arms tightened around her. "1 week from today, we leave for Montana." "Are you ready for our next adventure?" Clara tilted her face up to his, starlight reflected in her eyes. "With you beside me, I'm ready for anything." The journey to Montana Territory proved more challenging than their trip to Denver, taking them through rugged country that tested even Owen's experienced traveling skills. Yet Clara faced each obstacle with the same determination and spirit that had first captured Owen's heart, finding joy in the breathtaking landscapes and the freedom of the open trail. They settled in a growing town called Helena, where Owen's reputation as a tracker quickly earned him steady work with local ranchers and occasionally the territorial marshal. Clara, drawing on her experience in her father's store, found employment at the town's mercantile, her friendly manner and sharp business sense making her a valued employee. Within a year, they had saved enough to purchase a modest homestead just outside town, a snug cabin with enough land for a garden and a few animals, with mountains rising majestically in the distance. It wasn't grand, but to Clara and Owen, it was perfect. "Our own place," Clara marveled on the day they moved in, standing in the doorway of their new home. "I can scarcely believe it." Owen wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Believe it, my love, this is just the beginning." Life settled into a rhythm that suited them both, hard work balanced by quiet evenings together, the challenges of frontier living tempered by the deep bond they shared. Letters arrived regularly from Riverton, keeping them connected to Henry and the friends they had left behind. Mrs. Holloway, true to form, wrote detailed accounts of town gossip that never failed to make them laugh. It was in their second year in Montana that Clara discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Owen with a mixture of elation and terror that amused his wife greatly. "You faced down outlaws and wild animals without flinching," she teased as he fussed over her one evening. "Yet the prospect of a baby has you pale as a ghost." Owen placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Outlaws and wild animals, I understand. This is altogether different." His expression softened. "A life we created together, Clara. It's a miracle I never thought I'd be blessed enough to witness." The months of waiting passed in a blur of preparation, a cradle crafted by Owen's hands, tiny garments sewn by Clara, and endless discussions about names and hopes for their child's future. When winter came early that year, bringing deep snows that sometimes isolated their homestead, they found themselves grateful for the cozy nest they had built together. On a clear, cold night in February 1879, after a labor that tested Clara's strength to its limits, their son was born, a robust boy with a shock of dark hair and eyes as blue as his father's. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, cradling the newborn with reverent hands. "What shall we call him?" Clara, exhausted but radiant, touched the baby's tiny fingers. "Henry, after my father, Henry Thomas Callahan." Owen nodded, emotion making his voice rough. "A fine name for a fine boy." As their son grew, so did their homestead. Owen's reputation continued to spread, bringing more work than he could handle alone. By the time Henry was 3, the Callahans had expanded their property to include a small ranch operation, with a handful of hired hands helping to manage the increasing herds. Clara, balancing motherhood with her own contributions to their growing enterprise, never lost her sense of adventure. When Owen's work occasionally took him on extended tracking expeditions, she sometimes joined him, leaving Henry in the capable hands of their housekeeper, a kind widow named Mrs. Finch, who had become like family. "Most wives would prefer to stay home," Owen observed after one such journey, as they rode side by side through a mountain pass that took his breath away with its beauty. Clara laughed, the sound echoing off the surrounding peaks. "When have I ever been most wives? Besides, how could I miss seeing this?" She gestured to the spectacular vista before them. "You promised me adventures, Owen Callahan, and I intend to hold you to that promise." In the spring of 1882, their family grew again with the arrival of a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose Ellie, for short, who inherited her mother's emerald eyes and determined spirit. Henry, now 6 and fiercely protective of his baby sister, appointed himself her guardian and teacher, solemnly explaining the workings of the ranch to the infant who could only coo in response. Life wasn't without its hardships. Montana winters could be brutal, testing their resilience. There were lean years when crops failed or cattle prices dropped, illnesses that brought fear into their hearts, and the constant challenges of frontier living. Yet through it all, the foundation they had built remained unshakable, a partnership forged in trust and deepened by shared experience. On the 10th anniversary of the day they first met, Owen surprised Clara with a special gift. He had secretly commissioned a jeweler in Helena to create a new ring that combined elements of both their bands, a gold and silver twist set with a small emerald and Owen's father's initials engraved inside. "To replace the placeholder that became so much more," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger alongside her mother's ring. Clara admired the beautiful creation, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect, Owen. Like our life together, different pieces coming together to create something stronger and more beautiful than either could be alone." That evening, as they sat on the porch of their expanded home watching their children play in the yard, Henry, now lanky and adventurous, Ellie a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder. "You ever think about that day in Riverton?" she asked. "When you rode in chasing a thief?" Owen smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Only every day. One moment I was a drifter with no destination that mattered, and the next I was promising a beautiful, tearful woman that I'd find her lost treasure." "And you did," Clara murmured. "I found far more than a ring," Owen corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I found my home, my purpose, my heart." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara thought about the long, winding path that had led them here from a stolen ring to a love that had only deepened with each passing year. She remembered the words Owen had spoken on that porch in Riverton, words that had changed the course of her life forever. "She said he sold my ring," Clara recited softly. "The cowboy said, 'Then I'll give you mine and never let go.'" Owen's arms tightened around her. "Best promise I ever made," he whispered, "and one I intend to keep for all our days to come." In the gathering twilight, surrounded by the life they had built together, Clara Nichols Callahan knew with absolute certainty that some treasures, once found, were meant to be held forever, just like the love of the man who had promised never to let go, and never had.